Part 1. There is a moment that doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't break anything on the outside. It comes quietly. You might be making tea, driving, lying awake before sleep, or sitting next to someone you've known for years. And suddenly a thought appears, not as a sentence, but as a feeling, something like, what if I was loved only while I was easy? Not rejected, not unloved, just easier. Easier to be around, easier to fit into expectations, easier to keep close without asking for much space. It's not an accusation, it's not even a conclusion, it's a hesitation, because when you look back, nothing seems obviously wrong. There were moments of warmth, moments of closeness, moments that felt real, and yet you notice how often you stayed quiet, how often you adjusted, how often you softened your edges before anyone asked you to. You remember how naturally it came, how automatic it was, not because you were pretending, but because disappearing a little felt safer than risking distance. And now, as you stay present a bit longer, as you don't rush to smooth everything over, as you don't shrink at the first sign of discomfort, that old balance feels disturbed. No one says anything, but something feels different, and that's when the doubt appears. Was I loved for who I am, or for how little I needed? It's not a question you want to ask, because once it's asked, it can't be unheard. If the answer is comforting, everything stays the same, but if it isn't, then the entire story begins to shift. So the mind hesitates. Maybe I'm overthinking, maybe this is unnecessary, maybe this thought is unfair, and yet it keeps returning, not as panic, not as drama, as a quiet pressure inside the chest. Because something has already changed, not in the relationship, but in you. Part 2. It's easy to confuse love with comfort, especially when you've learned to be comfortable to love. Comfort is predictable. It doesn't ask questions. It doesn't disrupt routines. It doesn't demand space. And from the outside, comfort can look exactly like care. Someone stays, someone doesn't leave, someone is there. But presence alone doesn't always mean being seen. Sometimes it simply means that everything is running smoothly. No friction, no resistance, no inconvenience. And if you've spent years adapting quietly, that smoothness can feel like proof. Proof that you're valued. Proof that you matter. Proof that the connection is real. Until the moment you stop adjusting. Until you pause before agreeing. Until you express something that wasn't pre-approved. Until you don't immediately return to the role that made everything easy. That's when confusion appears. Not necessarily conflict, just uncertainty. A subtle distance, a change in tone, a shift in attention. Nothing dramatic enough to confront, nothing clear enough to name, but enough to notice. And that's when another thought forms. If being myself creates tension, what was keeping us close before? It's a painful realization because it doesn't accuse the other person. It turns inward. Maybe I asked too much. Maybe I changed. Maybe I'm the problem. And yet, nothing you're doing now feels extreme. You're not demanding devotion. You're not creating chaos. You're not pushing anyone away. You're simply existing with a little more weight. And if that weight alters the connection, the doubt deepens. Was closeness built on who I was or on who I wasn't? This question doesn't need an answer to hurt, because even asking it changes the way you remember everything that came before. Part 3. The deepest fear here isn't rejection. It's something quieter. It's the fear that if you are fully yourself, Nothing dramatic, nothing exaggerated, just fully present. You might not be chosen. Not abandoned, not rejected outright, just slowly, not prioritized. Because convenience doesn't compete. Convenience fits. But presence takes space. And space reveals things. Needs, edges, complexity. And when you realize that your presence alone might shift the dynamic, a terrifying thought emerges. What if love was conditional on my absence? Not absence from the relationship, but absence from myself. It's a hard thing to hold because it forces you to question the past without rewriting it, to acknowledge warmth without romanticizing it, to accept closeness without idealizing it. And most of all, it asks you to sit with uncertainty, not knowing whether being more yourself will deepen intimacy or expose that it was never built to hold you. There is no resolution here yet, only a pause, a moment where you stand between two truths, the comfort of being wanted while staying small, and the risk of being real without guarantees. And somewhere in that space, a new question begins to form, not about them, but about you. What does it mean to stay when you no longer disappear? Part 4. There is a strange kind of grief that appears here, not for a person, not for a relationship, but for the version of yourself that made everything work. The one who knew when to stay quiet, the one who sensed when to step back, the one who felt the room before entering it. That version wasn't fake. She was careful. She was intelligent. She was trying to survive closeness without losing connection. And for a long time, it worked. People stayed. Relationships continued. Life moved forward. So questioning it now feels almost disloyal, as if acknowledging the cost means erasing the love that existed. But that's not what's happening. What's happening is quieter. You begin to notice how tired you were, how often you carried the emotional balance alone, how natural it became to adapt before anyone even noticed tension. And you wonder, if love required me to be less, was that love fragile, or was I? This thought hurts because it doesn't let you place blame anywhere safe. You can't say, they used me, and you can't say, I was pretending. You are simply trying to belong. And belonging, when it's built on self-erasure, always asks for payment later. Not in anger, not in explosions, but in exhaustion. In the quiet realization that staying small kept you close, but never fully met. Part 5. At this point, many people rush toward answers. They name patterns, they label dynamics, they search for clarity. But this moment resists explanation. Because what you're facing isn't a problem to solve, it's a truth to sit with. A truth that says, closeness doesn't automatically mean acceptance. Stability doesn't automatically mean safety. And being loved doesn't always mean being known. This isn't about blaming others for not seeing you. It's about noticing how often you disappeared before they had the chance. Not because you were weak, but because being fully visible felt risky. Visible needs can be refused. Visible feelings can be misunderstood. Visible presence can be inconvenient. So invisibility felt like protection. And now that protection is loosening. Not because you decided to change, but because something in you refuses to keep shrinking. And that refusal feels dangerous. Because it removes the old guarantee. The guarantee that if you stay easy, you will be kept. Without that promise, everything feels uncertain. And yet, there is something quietly honest in this uncertainty. For the first time, closeness isn't maintained by self-erasure. For the first time, you're present enough to notice what holds and what doesn't. Part 6, Final. This is where the question finally settles, not as a demand, not as an ultimatum, but as a quiet truth waiting to be acknowledged. If love was only possible when I was less, then being more will reveal what was never meant to stay. And that realization is terrifying, not because it guarantees loss, but because it removes illusion. You may not know yet what remains. You may not know who stays. You may not know how closeness will change, but you do know this. You can no longer unknow yourself. You can no longer return to disappearing without feeling the cost. And perhaps that is the beginning of something different. Not clarity, not certainty, but honesty. The honesty of staying present even when it feels unsafe. The honesty of letting relationships show their true shape. The honesty of existing without reducing yourself for comfort. And the question that lingers, the one that doesn't ask for an answer yet, is this. If being real changes everything, what was everything built on in the first place? Gatov. Part 6, Final. This is where the question finally settles, not as a demand, not as an ultimatum, but as a quiet truth waiting to be acknowledged. If love was only possible when I was less, then being more will reveal what was never meant to stay. And that realization is terrifying, not because it guarantees loss, but because it removes illusion. You may not know yet what remains. You may not know who stays. You may not know how closeness will change, but you do know this. You can no longer unknow yourself. You can no longer return to disappearing without feeling the cost. And perhaps that is the beginning of something different. Not clarity, not certainty, but honesty. The honesty of staying present even when it feels unsafe. The honesty of letting relationships show their true shape. The honesty of existing without reducing yourself for comfort. And the question that lingers, the one that doesn't ask for an answer yet, is this. If being real changes everything, what was everything built on in the first place? Gatov.